The sound most survivors remember first wasn't an explosion. It was a long, deep shudder traveling through the floors, the kind that makes glasses rattle and conversations stop mid-sentence. Passengers aboard the Costa Concordia had been sitting down for dinner, heading back from the bars, or settling into their cabins for the night when the ship lurched to the side without warning. Plates slid across tables, lights flickered. Then came the noise, metal tearing against rock, a grinding roar that cut straight through the hull. For a moment, people froze, expecting a routine announcement. The Concordia was a luxury cruise liner, packed with more than 4,000 passengers and crew, and nothing in the calm waters off the island of Giglio suggested danger. But within seconds, the deck tilted again, harder this time, sending utensils clattering to the floor and knocking passengers against railings and walls. Somewhere deep in the ship, water was pouring through a gash more than 200 feet long. The first announcement told passengers it was just an electrical failure. Crew members tried to keep people calm, telling them to stay inside and wait. But the tilt grew sharper. In the lower decks, hallways flooded quickly. Elevators jammed. Some passengers opened cabin doors to find water rising around their feet. Others smelled fuel leaking from damaged tanks. The crew still insisted it was under control. At 10:05 p.m., the ship suddenly lost power. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the corridors in dim yellow. The Concordia had begun drifting toward the island's rocky shoreline. Without engine control, it swung sideways in the current, settling into a position that made walking feel like climbing. Families clung to railings, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Crew members shouted conflicting instructions, some directing people to life jackets, others insisting they return to their cabins. On the bridge, Captain Francesco Schettino and his officers struggled to understand the full scale of the damage. The ship had struck underwater rocks while performing a close salute to the island, an informal maneuver bringing the vessel closer to shore than normal. Schettino later claimed he didn't realize the extent of the breach, but the flooding was catastrophic. Compartments designed to keep water contained were filling too quickly. The ship was losing stability. Passengers waiting near lifeboats found chaos instead of order. Some davits wouldn't lower because of the ship's steep angle. Crew members assigned to the boats lacked proper training. Lifeboats swung dangerously as people tried to board. Others were lowered half full because panic made normal procedures impossible. Those who slipped into the lifeboats watched the ship continue to tilt, its massive white flank rising out of the sea like a grounded whale. One survivor, a mother traveling with her young daughter, remembered clinging to the railing as the deck felt like it was sliding out from under them. They tried to reach a lifeboat, but the crowd was too thick. A crew member told them to wait for the next one. When they turned around, water surged up the stairwell behind them. She grabbed her daughter and fought her way through the mass of people pressing toward the open deck. They eventually climbed over the railing and onto a lifeboat lowered so sharply that it scraped the ship's hull on the way down. Others weren't able to get to lifeboats at all. When the Concordia rolled further, passengers on the starboard side found themselves walking on walls instead of floors. Furniture, luggage, and broken glass slid past them. Some crew members shouted for people to move toward the higher side of the ship. A few jumped into the cold January water, hoping to swim toward the island lights glowing in the distance. Local fishermen launched their own boats to help pull people from the waves. Inside the ship, the situation was even worse. Stairwells tilted at impossible angles. Elevators dangled uselessly. Corridors filled with chest-deep water as the ship leaned onto its side. Passengers trying to reach the lifeboat stations became disoriented, moving through darkened hallways that felt more like collapsing tunnels. A group of survivors later described crawling along railings, using their phone flashlights to find a path upward. The entire ship groaned under its own shifting weight. More than an hour after impact, the official abandoned ship order was finally given. By then, the Concordia was lying on its side, half submerged. Rescuers from the island and the Italian Coast Guard arrived to find dozens of people clinging to the exposed hull. Helicopters used spotlights to search the dark water. Coast Guard boats circled the ship, pulling passengers aboard while shouting instructions in multiple languages. Survivors described the cold wind cutting through their soaked clothing as they waited for help, shivering but alive. In total, more than 4,000 people survived that night through a combination of instinct, luck, and the help of strangers. 32 others did not. Many of the survivors carried injuries, broken bones, hypothermia, and trauma that lingered long after the shipwreck became international news. The Concordia remained partially submerged off Giglio for more than 2 years, a towering reminder of a disaster that should never have happened. Captain Schettino was later convicted of manslaughter, causing a maritime disaster and abandoning ship. Investigators concluded that the decisions made on the bridge, along with the delayed evacuation order, played a direct role in the loss of life. Survivors testified about the confusion, miscommunication, and fear that dominated those first critical minutes. Some still remember the moment they realized the ship wasn't just damaged, it was dying beneath their feet. For the people who lived through it, survival wasn't a single heroic moment. It was a series of choices made while surrounded by darkness, shouting, and the sickening tilt of a vessel that had lost its balance. Some escaped through lifeboats that barely reached the water. Others crawled through hallways that had become vertical drops. Many were pulled into rescue boats by strangers who refused to let them slip under the waves. The Costa Concordia disaster became one of the most infamous maritime tragedies in modern times, but for its survivors, it remains something far more personal. It is the night they climbed, swam, crawled, or held on long enough to see the lights of rescue boats cutting through the dark. It is the night they walked away from a ship that was supposed to carry them safely home. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.